Welcome to this complete masterclass on the best camera for YouTube. In this very video, we're going to be talking about the 13 features that you should look for when picking out a camera. But really at the top here, let's talk about 4 things to consider when searching for the perfect camera. And the first one is going to be your budget. Of course, there's a lot of great cameras out there, but they're at all kinds of different prices. So it's nice to define up front, what is your budget to spend on a new camera? Next is features. What features do you actually need? What versus what features do you want? Next is size. Of course, you could get a lot of great features in the camera, but if it's too heavy to travel with, or you need it to be mobile, or you want to take it into a concert or something, can you actually take it with you? And then finally is skill level. Maybe if you have a very high skill level, you can get a lot of powerful performance out of a camera. But for others that maybe you're new to cameras, you want a beginner friendly camera. So I like to think about these 4 things when picking out the perfect camera. What is your total budget to invest? What is the size and weight of the camera? And complexity can actually slow you down. And so simplicity can really help you create better content for YouTube. So this masterclass is how to choose a camera for video and YouTube. And if you're grateful for deep dive educational videos like this, hit the like button. And let's dive into the 13 features you need to know so you don't buy the wrong camera. Have you ever felt overwhelmed when it comes to technology, cameras? Am I going to pick the wrong camera because, I didn't even know that there's a thing as record limits. Why does my camera stop recording at 30 minutes? A lot of cameras do, right? You didn't even think about it until you ran into that problem. So if you don't want to waste money and hours of research, then stick around for this entire deep dive training. I've personally tested and been shooting video and photography. I've personally tested over 150 cameras over the last 18 years, made a ton of mistakes. And so in this video, I'm going to share everything that I've learned on the journey, plus 3 tips for saving money on gear. And we've also added time codes and chapters for this comprehensive training so you can skip around to the parts that matter most to you, because I really value your time. If we're just meeting, my name is Sean Cannell, and I'm on a mission to help people build their influence with YouTube. And look, cameras can be confusing, right? And I encourage you, start with what you have. There's something about this journey. You're not going to know everything up front. This is actually a picture of me and my wife, Sonia, in 2003. And you can see we're hanging with some friends. We got some cameras. I've been in the game for a little while, and it's all about just starting with what you have and then leveling up your gear as you go. In 2009, I'm shooting with a HV30 there. I was at a wedding. I have an excessive amount of cable for holding a shotgun mic because I didn't have a mount, as you can see on screen. But I've just been leveling up as I go. As you earn more money from your YouTube business, as you earn more money from your primary business, or as you save up and invest in gear, use what you have, level up as you go, because we're going to get pretty geeky. And of course, you can end up spending a ton of money on cameras, and sometimes money that is unnecessary. So I want to ask you, are you planning on buying a camera soon? And if so, which model? Let me know in the comments. And let's talk about these 13 camera features so you don't buy the wrong camera. The first is sensor size. When it comes to picking the right camera, you want to make sure that you you think about the sensor size. This is going to affect your image quality. This is how you get that cool blurry background depth of field, right? Is what it's called. This is your low light performance, and bigger typically equals better. Of course, that's going to make the camera larger, right? It's going to affect the size, but typically the bigger the sensor, the better. And also the bigger the sensor, the more expensive. And so this is why people say, oh, I'm excited because someday I'm going to upgrade to a full frame camera. This right here is an older Canon 80D. This has a crop sensor, APS-C sensor. So there's all kinds of different sizes of sensors. And this DJI Osmo action camera, it's a much smaller sensor. And my smartphone right behind these lenses, It's a much smaller sensor. Of course, technology is evolving, and in some cases, because of the actual processor, low light could be better. But this is typically when you really want to get that cool YouTube look, you want to be thinking about the sensor. And to give you an idea of sensor sizes compared, this is a full frame sensor. This is an APS-C sensor, which is very common for a lot of Sony, Canon, Nikon, Panasonic cameras. This is a what they call a 1-inch sensor, which you might find inside of a ZV-1 or a Canon G7X. And then there's what's typically a smartphone sensor. So again, you sort of get, this is in a to scale comparison based on what is on your screen size, but generally you see where it says perfect for YouTube. That's usually the range where most YouTube creators want to be. If you really want that rich, better, more filmic, cinematic look, some people want to go to full frame. Typically, photographers want to go to full frame. But of course, using your smartphone to create YouTube content works as well. So this is just one of the 13 factors when you're picking out a camera. You're asking yourself, what is the sensor size? If I want the best image quality, if I want that blurry background, that bokeh, that depth of field, if I want good low light performance. Now, number two is the video resolution. This is actually different than the sensor size because a small sensor action camera might be able to shoot 5K video, 6K, 8K video, but it could be deceiving. So when you think about your sensor, when you think about video resolution, you can see on screen here, 4K, also known as 2160p. You can see how big 4K is compared to HD video. And then anybody remember DVDs? Let me know in the comments. 480p was what original DVDs were actually in terms of image quality. Kind of crazy, right? So 4K is actually 4 times larger than HD. And so if you think about these different resolutions, a lot of the newer Sony cameras, in fact, almost all new cameras are in at least 4K, if not higher now. Some of the older DSLRs and older Sony cameras or Nikon or Panasonic, they're still HD. A lot of webcams are full HD. And so I would say going into 2022 that HD is the minimum. I mean, you definitely want to be uploading HD. However, 4K is mainstream on TVs and phones now. And so 4K, it's if you're going to invest in a new camera, it's become so affordable. I would definitely lean into 4K. You can get away without it, but I would go 4K. Now, 4K also requires a better computer to edit. So it's potentially a little bit harder to edit. So whenever you change your workflow, it might disrupt everything else. You get a new camera, you're like, shoot, now I need a new laptop. Now I need external hard drive for larger file sizes. So you want to kind of think about all the different domino effects that can happen when upgrading. And then shooting in a larger resolution will also allow you to crop in when editing. So sometimes what people like to do is they actually like to shoot in 4K. They still might do a 1080p project, but what ends up happening is you can crop into different parts of the video because you just have more resolution to play with. And so having 4K is just better. And those are some things to consider when it comes to video resolution. And if you can imagine, this is a picture of my wife, Sonia, and my son, Sean Bradley. Full HD would only have our dog Sophie in this particular shot in regards to 1/4 of 4K, whereas 4K gives you so much more of an image. But when I say crop in, if I wanted to crop in and still maintain all of the resolution in video editing, we could get a nice close-up shot of our Chihuahua Sophie because we shot in 4K. So some questions to ask, though, about cameras that shoot in 4K, because it sometimes causes problems. You ask yourself, is there a record limit? Not just a camera record limit. Some cameras can only do 10 minutes of 4K or 16 minutes of 4K because they buffer or they overheat. Is there an image crop? A lot of the Canon cameras that say they're 4K cameras, like the Canon M50 or the EOS R or EOS RP, they have a 1.7 or 1.6 times crop. So all of a sudden you're like framing your shot. You're like, okay, this looks great. you press record and all of a sudden it's like zooms in and it crops in because 4K takes more processing power. So just because you see this 4K logo on the outside of the box or on the website, you still need to ask yourself, okay, how dependable is that 4K? And does the camera overheat when shooting 4K? Sony's have struggled with this at times. It's seemingly less. I have a Canon R6, which I love mainly for photography. I love the 4K video. It's not cropped. It looks beautiful. It overheats. At least it does for me. Every time I shoot with it, it overheats when I shoot 4K. So if you're looking for all these different features and you want the most dependable camera possible, these are some things to consider. Now, I've also put a complete list of the best cameras I recommend for YouTube in 2022 in the description, and you can expand the description to find that link to see that updated list. And what I'm working towards is really kind of the perfect camera for YouTube that checks all of the boxes that we're learning in this training. So the third thing now is lens aperture. Some cameras have interchangeable lenses, so you have the option of upgrading later and getting access to different lens apertures, essentially. Some fixed lens cameras, like a point and shoot camera or a smartphone camera, this is what it is. You're not going to be able to change it because you can't change your lens. So lens apertures are essentially, as you kind of see, as it opens wider, you see an f1.4 in that image there, and then when you stop down, it's closed. It's kind of like a fan that closes, and this is how much light is allowed into the camera. Are we getting too geeky yet? Let's keep going. So here's what the lens aperture influences. It influences your low light performance. This is why if you were, when I shoot wedding videos, and I had in the past, a video production business called Clear Vision Media, I wanted to get a f1.4 or 1.2 lens to not just have this really cool blurry background look, but also to be able to shoot in candlelight dinners because a lot of low light, because it was good in low light. And then combine that with a full frame sensor, and you're off to the races in terms of low light performance. This also influences that blurry background. If you say, man, I just don't know, I watch these YouTube creators, they have this awesome like blurry background. Why is everything in focus in my shot? Now, smartphones are also faking the blurry background, right? They're doing it digitally. So the lower number here is typically better, and the lower number here is more expensive. If you buy a kit lens at Costco with some Canon camera, it might start at f4.5. That's the starting aperture or the lowest aperture. If you buy an 85 millimeter 1.2 from Canon, it's a $3,000 lens just for the lens, but it just gives you a crazy look. So it looks better, but it's also going to cost a lot more money. And so to see this number, if you look on the lens, we're looking at a Canon Rebel T7i with the kit lens. You can see that it starts at 3.5. And then as you zoom in, it'll go up to 5.6. And then you can make the aperture stop it down even more than that, but it'll be forced to be at least 5.6 when it's fully zoomed in. So this is the lens aperture. On some point and shoot cameras, we can see that this Sony camera here starts at 1.8, which is great. This Canon camera, this G7X, starts at 1.8. Again, a really great starting aperture for a point and shoot camera. We're seeing this a lot. This Sony camera, which is kind of a niche, it's called the DSCWX 350. It's a $288 camera at the time of recording this, and it starts at 3.5 on the aperture. So there's a lot of factors in this camera, but one of the reasons it's more affordable is it doesn't have as good of a lens built in. And we're looking at some fixed lens cameras here. Whereas this, one of our favorite cameras, the ZV-1, again, starts at 1.8. And when you zoom it all the way in, you can still be at 2.8, which is also phenomenal, but it's a $798 retail price camera. Now, in this picture, you can see Omar from the Think team, and you can see that this gimbal and this camera that he's holding is in focus, and he is 2 feet away from it, and he's completely blurry. It's because I'm shooting with a Canon SL2 DSLR here, a more affordable DSLR, but I'm shooting with a very nice 50 millimeter 1.2 lens, which is twice the price of the camera or more. And so that is influenced by the aperture. And so, number three here, we're talking about aperture and talking about lens app options. These are some questions to ask. What is the starting aperture of your lens? Can you upgrade your lenses later? This is good news because, as you're thinking about maybe what camera body do you want to buy, just the body without the lenses, you might say, well, I can start with the kit lens now, and I can see an upgrade path. As I save up, I could upgrade to other lenses later to continue to evolve my content. And it's the aperture plus the sensor, which is going to equal that low light performance. There's a few other factors, in terms of the technology inside of the camera, the megapixels and things like that. But these are the biggest factors that I think about. Man, can I get a large sensor? My dream setup, if money is no object, is a full frame camera that has really great glass, aka really great lenses on it. But remember, the four things we talked about was what's your budget. Also, what's the size? So right here, this is a full frame Canon R6. This is my favorite lens actually in the entire world because it starts at f2. It's a 28 to 70 and it can be fixed f2 through the entire range. This lens is $3,100 just by itself. And so I love this setup. But then remember, it's not just budget, features, but also size. A lot of times my arm's about to break off with how heavy this lens is. It's like full of more glass, it's heavier than my Ford Explorer. So ultimately, you want to think about these different factors when it comes to the look you want and all the features you want. And sometimes it becomes impractical as apertures get lower, lenses get heavier. And as apertures get lower, lenses get they also get larger. And so all of these different things come into play. So ask yourself, can I invest in a good camera body now and upgrade your lenses later? Some people think about it the opposite way. They think about, can I actually invest in good glass? Like I can hand this lens down to my son, Sean Bradley, in 10 years. I really actually believe that. The Canon body will get better and it will evolve more. But this lens with the red line when it comes from Canon, so crispy, dependable, built like a rock. If you treat this nice, sometimes you can keep your glass with you for 5 years, 10 years, and it's still relevant. On my shelf behind me, I have old Nikon lenses that are 30 years old that are manual focus that I convert to my Canon cameras that are $50 on eBay. So sometimes glass can really last a long time. Next is autofocus. This training, this masterclass is for the best cameras for YouTube that are also the most user-friendly and that are going to give you the fastest workflow. This might not be relevant for photographers. This might not be relevant for filmmakers who are going to manually pull focus and different things like that. But when it comes to YouTube, I believe this is a critical component. And so I look for face tracking. I look for fast autofocus. You don't want it to be like slowly be going, trying to, and it takes like forever to actually lock on focus. So the speed of the autofocus, that it doesn't hunt. Have you ever seen a video where the person's in focus and they go blurry and then they're back and then they go blurry and it goes back and forth? You don't want the focus hunting and you want it to be dependable. You want it to stay locked on to the person. And so really what you want is phase detection autofocus, not contrast-based autofocus. This pretty much means that Sony and Canon are your options. Now, remember, what features do you need? If you can live without this, in fact, I'm shooting on a Panasonic camera and I just have the focus locked down. It's just, I manually get it locked on my face and it's not hunting because autofocus is turned off. And this looks great. So you can work around any of these features. But if you're finding the perfect camera for YouTube, you want some great autofocus. And Panasonic and Nikon to this day are still contrast based. It's somewhat improving at times and people get away with it. But when you compare the two camera brands, Sony and Canon really have the corner on the market when it comes to autofocus. Now, to be clear, Canon, you need to find Canon cameras that are new enough to have dual pixel autofocus. The newest Canon cameras have quad pixel autofocus now, but some of the other ones are still contrast based. They're, I think it's called hybrid, some of the older models, but any newer Canon is going to have it, and all the newer Sonys are going to be phase detection. Next is audio. So if you want the perfect YouTube camera, I like to have a mic input. Kind of rare still sometimes. A lot of point and shoot cameras do not have a mic input. Even better is also a headphone output. This now would allow you to plug in an external microphone like this, allows you to put on a pair of headphones to monitor your audio as well while shooting. Very rare actually to see headphone outputs, or a lot more rare. Typically, you're going to be spending over $1,000. I can't think of many cameras or any that have headphone outputs under that, really. Then you also want or a good on-camera microphone, because there's plenty of cameras, point and shoot cameras, that you might use for vlogging. Your smartphone might sound great. You just hold it up, you just start vlogging with it. If it doesn't have a mic input, then you want to make sure it has a good on-camera microphone, because audio is so important. And so I'm asking myself, does it have these items? And I'm going through this checklist. Now, by following this entire class, and let me know if you're getting value, and hit the like button, you're going to be the smartest person in the room when it comes to cameras. And it's just going to give you the questions to ask if you're at a camera store. If you're talking, you're going to know more than the rep at the camera store, because these are going to be intelligent questions to say, oh, does it also have? These are some of the features I would also want to see in the camera. And here's the cool thing when it comes to audio, because you might be watching this and like, shoot, I don't have any of this stuff yet. I have this older camera. There's a solution to every problem. I shot this video with a cheap action camera, a budget action camera, and it didn't have a mic input. But what I did was I plugged in a lavalier microphone that's like $10 off Amazon into my smartphone with a little dongle, and recorded the audio separate with the smartphone in my pocket. Just turn on the audio recorder. And then I put it into the video editing software and synced up the audio and the video. So I was shooting with like $100 action camera and a $10 microphone. I want to encourage you, there are solutions to every problem, and there's workarounds. But of course, our goal here is that if you're going to invest in a new camera, you want it to be fast, you want it to be dependable, you want it to be maybe set it and forget it, and you want to remove as much complexity from your workflow as possible. Number 6 is size, weight, and build quality. So GoPros typically, and action cameras, not only typically, they're usually terrible in low light. Like, you don't want it to be nighttime in the city, taking out your GoPro thinking you're going to get good footage. Just doesn't really happen because the sensor is small. Now, what's amazing is that sensors are improving, or technology of processing video is improving. And so some smartphones are getting better, smaller sensors. They're getting better in low light. So, but you go, I want the camera to be small. I want to be able to travel with it. I want to be able to take it into a concert or something. Okay. But if you're going to get really crispy footage in low light, you might need a bigger camera. So there's it's the tension pulling at the different sizes, and this GoPro fits in your pocket, but it's not going to get you the same image as a nicer, larger camera. And there could be camcorders, point and shoot cameras, DSLRs, mirrorless cameras. So you want to ask yourself, what is a good size for you? What kind of size do you want to take with you when it comes to choosing your camera? Now, I love this quote from Chase Jarvis, because again, he says the best camera is the one that's with you. And I have sometimes found that if I'm going to go out with my wife, Sonia, and my son, Sean Bradley, that because I don't want my arm to break off, I sometimes leave this at home. A lot of times it's a lot to take with me. On the flip side, I always have my phone with me, and therefore it becomes incredibly practical for capturing moments, capturing video. And so the best camera is the one you have with you, something to consider when you're thinking about size. Now, some questions to ask are, what are you going to use it for? And also, do you have a budget for multiple cameras? Because as your career evolves as a content creator, as a YouTube creator, it's not one size fits all. There's different tools for different situations. And so maybe you have a studio and a live stream studio built out, and then maybe you have something you're vlogging with. Action cameras are great because in the middle of the sunny day or daylight, daytime, they can look absolutely amazing. But then if you're vlogging, maybe at nighttime, you switch to a point and shoot camera that's going to be a little bit better to tell the entire story of the day. I'm not suggesting that you have to get a whole bunch of cameras all at once, right? Use what you have, level up as you go. But do you have budget for multiple cameras? A complete travel vlogger kit, in my opinion, would probably be like a Sony ZV-1, a point and shoot camera, and an action camera with a waterproof case and a drone, because you want to storytell in multiple different formats. You could keep all of those items relatively low and they could all fit in a backpack. So think about what would be your dream setup. In fact, let me know if you were building a dream setup. Tell me in the comments what it would be. And what we're discovering too is that mirrorless cameras can kind of be the best of both worlds because they're getting smaller, they're getting lighter, and they can do a lot of things. And they could be your live stream solution. They could be good in low light. They could be small enough. They can have in-body image stabilization, which we'll talk about in a little while, which make them stable for action or driving and all kinds of different things. So cameras have really been evolving. It's pretty exciting. Now, another thing to think about with build quality is some of the more budget cameras are plastic and they're not really weatherproof. Whereas if you look at something like a GH5, it's actually a weatherproof body and it's built for rugged use. Kind of has like a rubbery exterior. Now, this doesn't probably matter for most of us because you're like, I'm going to be in my apartment. The camera's going to be on a tripod. It's not going to be snowing inside of my apartment, probably not. And I'm going to be cool with that. But if I'm going to be using this for videography, cinematography, throwing it in and out of bags, setting it up on shoots, I might want better build quality. These are different factors to consider. Number 7, selfie screen and touch screen. For YouTube creators, it is ideal to have a screen that is easily flip up or flip to the side that allows you to see yourself so you can frame your shot and create the best content possible as a solo creator. I mean, assume if you have a videographer following you around, then they can frame the shot for you, right? But kind of the invention of the selfie screen is sort of the invention of like, I'm doing this alone. I'm doing this on my own, right? And so this is ideal for YouTube content and vlogging. Now, not all screens are also touch screen. So unfortunately, it's been interesting. Sony has kind of been slow to evolve their screens and their menu system. But touchscreen makes things even easier. So one of the nice things about Canon cameras is you can reach up, tap your face, and a box goes around your face, and it's just you're in focus and things are great. And so remember, there's build quality, or there's size, there's budget, there's the features, and then there's also how beginner friendly is it, or how simple is it to use to get a great shot. Now, a cool feature, as we said, is a touchscreen during for autofocus during video. Sometimes also when you're behind the camera, I like a lot of Canon cameras for this. You touch objects; it'll focus on the car, and then it'll focus on the person, and you just touch where you want it to focus. And it's a very nice feature and something to look for. Number 8, this is a big one that a lot of people miss. Have you ever seen this message? Movie recording has been stopped automatically. The record limit. Sean, why do cameras have a record limit? Well, without going into the entire history, it has some to do with taxes. And in different countries, there would be an added tax to a camera if it could record video clips that are longer than 29 minutes and 59 seconds. Then it becomes a video camera. So all of these people using mirrorless cameras and DSLR cameras for video, all these companies, they, limit the recording limit to avoid that tax. There's other reasons that sometimes it has to do with file size. And sometimes it's just been left in as a way to cripple cameras in some cases. Now, what's been cool to see is that Panasonic and Sony has evolved, and they're really allowing unlimited record times, still getting also the benefit, though, of a mirrorless camera, the lens choices, a DSLR camera with the lens choices and the sensor size. And so this can be a very frustrating thing. Now, if you're a YouTube content creator, you may be just shooting clips all day. Remember, What are you going to use it for? 5-minute clip, 8-minute clip, 15-minute clip. You would never record a 30-minute clip. You're going around vlogging. You don't need a mic input because you're just using the on-camera mic. It's all good. You're just going around. But in our community here at Think Media, a lot of us want to create video podcasts. And that would be the idea of sitting down like I'm doing right here and maybe recording to an SD card and shooting a 40-minute video or a longer than an hour interview. And so, do you want an unlimited record limit? The many DSLRs and mirrorless cameras have a 30-minute record limit. It's very frustrating. And so, do you need to record clips longer than 30 minutes? So we love Sony cameras here at Think Media because all of the new ones made in the last couple of years pretty much have unlimited record times. And if you see on screen, there is a little battery plug-in. So now you can plug that little plug goes into the battery port, that you plug that into the wall. So you have unlimited power and unlimited record time. And so you're good to go for like a live stream like this. I've got a dummy battery plugged into this camera. I can run this camera all day long. And you're able to, the exception here is that some cameras allow you to live stream in a different way continually like I'm doing. But if you could imagine, I have an SD card in my camera and I just want to hit record and I have unlimited power, it's going to record until the SD card is full. I don't know if that's actually true. I've never really tried a lot of it. I don't know if there's like a 2-hour limit or a 4-hour limit, but what are you doing if you're recording for that long to an SD card? Let me know. Another thing to consider is camcorder versus DSLR and mirrorless cameras. Sometimes people ask Sean, like, why don't you even talk about camcorders? And we are actually going to cover, there's some new camcorders out that have a little bit larger sensor sizes. The nice thing about camcorders is a lot of times you can get a selfie screen, headphone jack, and a mic input for around $300. So why wouldn't we all use these? Well, typically because they're smaller sensors. They don't look anywhere as cool as mirrorless and DSLR cameras look. You don't get sometimes like really cool wide angle YouTuber creative shots. You don't have interchangeable lenses unless you spend a lot more money. And so that's another thing to consider if you want simplicity and to have an unlimited record limit, because it's actually a camcorder. It's intended for that. What we're seeing, especially with the newer Sonys, is we're just seeing a hybrid of it all. Unlimited record limit, interchangeable lenses, headphone jack, all the things all in one with the image quality that you want. But we'll link up to a couple different videos on these topics. If there's any one of these topics that you want to go deeper on, expand the description and you can see a whole bunch of resources, including a conversation about camcorders versus DSLRs and camcorders versus mirrorless cameras. Number 9, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and NFC. We're talking about the 13 things to look for when picking the perfect camera. And the next one would be, this is very common now, but can I control it from my phone? This is an extra feature that should be standard in all new cameras. This allows you to transfer your content to your phone for social media. You can use your phone as a remote control for your camera. And in some cases, your camera actually can be your selfie screen, or rather your phone can. So if your camera doesn't have a selfie screen, you can use the app on your phone. So in a dream situation, you connect up the app that is from your camera manufacturer, get it all synced up via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. And now you can at least see yourself and you go, okay, I'm framing myself up, and even start and stop the recording. Very cool feature that is perfect for YouTube creators if you want that benefit. Now, number 10 is skill level. Remember, more features does not necessarily mean better. You see, some of us are like, I just want it all. I want all the features. But then what happens is you set it up and you're like, I don't know how to get this thing right. It looks worse than my phone. It looks worse than this basic camera I had, because now you're trying to dial in the color profile and get the lens right and get the frame rate right and get all the different details right. So when I think about skill level, this is actually a beginner mode that Canon has included on a lot of their cameras that eliminate all of the nuances. You can turn it off later, but it's kind of nice because it simplifies things down. And notice on the screen, it says, do you want it blurred? There's that low aperture conversation we're going back to, or do you want it sharp? And you just scroll your finger on the touch screen towards the results you want. And it's actually a great way to learn and get educated. So maybe you're watching this, you want to buy a camera for your a child or someone in your family, a teenager or yourself, and you're newer to cameras, there might be a good camera to learn on. And you could go to Costco or you could check out our list of best cameras and get something like the M50 Mark II that is a great kind of all around camera. Doesn't quite hit all of these features, but it's going to be great for a couple of years and it'll be a good camera to learn on because this is a lot. And I know this can feel overwhelming. Number 11, image stabilization. Huge, huge thing to consider, especially if you plan on leaving the house, right? Here I am sitting, this camera is on a tripod on my desk. We are live. It's all good. I don't really need image stabilization in this situation. But if you want to vlog, you want to move around, then consider, does the camera have image stabilization? And you can see here, there's a little switch that says stabilizer on or off on this lens. So here's the 3 types of image stabilization. First is optical lens image stabilization. Now what this is, right, is this is built into the lens itself is a motor that actually stabilizes and takes out shake of the lens. This particular lens does not have that. Okay. And so this lens over here from Canon, it says stabilizer on and off. You might turn it off because you actually want things to be a little bit sharper, sometimes stabilization, or it could add a little movement when the camera is locked down on a tripod. So you can turn it on and off. And this has optical stabilization built into the lens. So now you're actually asking yourself, okay, what is my camera's stabilization situation? And then also, what lenses am I using for my camera and what's their stabilization situation? Next is electronic image stabilization. IS stands for image stabilization. And electronic image stabilization is actually being done by software. They're shaking the video because you're out there, shooting, filming stuff, shooting at stuff, and you're trying to be as stable as possible, but there's shake created by you. So what the camera inside the software is going to stabilize the shot. Sometimes this can cause problems. It causes a warpy effect. And a lot of times when you turn on electric image stabilization, it'll crop in. You have this nice wide shot, but it crops in. Why? Because the camera is actually going to use those edges to try to remove the shake. It's going to crop in a little bit to give the frame a little bit of movement electronically. This has been done well by some cameras, and this has been done horribly by other cameras. What's nice is you can turn it on and off. Some electronic image stabilization that's actually pretty impressive is a lot of times on like the GoPro, where software based, someone's just barreling down a mountain on a mountain bike and it's smooth. I think they call it hyper smooth because they've really kind of evolved that. And it's such a wide image. That's one of the big keys. The image a lot of times is even wider than you can imagine because they're using the edges of the image to stabilize its software. And now it looks really smooth to you. And then the final one is IBIS, which stands for in-body image stabilization. This now is actually inside of or around the sensor. And this is a Canon R6. Around the sensor is a motor, and the sensor itself is going to be stabilized, and it's going to remove shake. And that's called in-body image stabilization. And that can be done well and also poorly as well. And so you're like, my God, Sean, how there's so many different things. Like, how do I know? This is the camera culture that is evolving. And what's fascinating is that you actually could combine all of the above. So you could have optical image stabilization with a camera that has IBIS, and you can turn on the electronic stabilization. It crops in a little bit, and potentially you might be a shaky shooter, especially with a camera that weighs, 400 pounds, and yet the end result is super smooth. Of course, the reason this is so important is because if you've ever watched a vlogger, a YouTube creator, and you're like, dear God, it's sometimes not even the fact that it's shaky, because obviously they're walking and they're moving, but there's almost like lens jitter. Like it actually has like a vibration to it. So the nice thing about image stabilization is it can bring some smoothness to the shot. So you'll see this electronic image stabilization in DJI Osmo's Rock Steady is what they call it. GoPro calls it Hyper Smooth. And this is why we recommend the GoPro for vlogging as one of the options, because it's pleasant to see a shot that is nice and smooth when you're walking around documenting things. There's weaknesses to GoPros, but that is the image stabilization side of things. If you look on a Canon lens like this G7X, notice that it says IS on the lens. Okay. That stands for image stabilization. So now you know that that lens is stabilized. And then this Sony camera has steady shot optical image stabilization. So Sony also will call it OSS, optical stabilization, or OOS, something like that. And so sometimes there's the software side, sometimes there's the actual lens side. We're talking about point and shoot cameras now, right? This is a Canon G7X Mark III. It's got an IS engraved right there on the lens. So we know that this particular point and shoot camera has a little bit of stabilization in the lens and also has some electronic stabilization. And typically, light electronic image stabilization combined with the lens gives you a nice look. Are you tracking with me? I'm like, wow, we are deep into some tech speak, are we not? And so, image stabilization, just another thing for you to consider. And we had talked about IBIS now, which is a relatively newer feature and is going to be more expensive. I don't think you really see IBIS in cameras that are under $1,000, maybe a couple Panasonics, but you are seeing IBIS in higher end cameras, and it usually means the camera is also going to become larger. It brings into the size factor of things. But the most cutting edge cameras now that have, if you will, the full stack of features have IBIS. And so you're going to see this in the A6600. You're going to see this in the R5 and the R6, the Panasonic GH5. And again, these cameras on screen actually will perform best, not just with the IBIS, but if you also equip the camera with a lens that has image stabilization, optical image stabilization. And now you have a power combo for some really smooth footage in camera. Now, remember, there's a solution to every problem. And so you might say, Sean, like I've got an older camera. Is there any way to get around the shake? Like, what can I do? Well, of course, you can choose the kind of content you're creating. You can lock down your camera on a tripod. You can shoot on a monopod. You know, it's funny because these new school creators that are, you're watching this, maybe you're joining the game right now. You're thinking about these 13 features. There's almost like a culture, and this is coming from the old school, been in the game 18 years, looking at these young whippersnappers who are like, it doesn't have IBIS. Oh my gosh, this camera doesn't have perfect autofocus. Listen, I started my freaking business in 2009 called Clear Vision Media. I was shooting on a Canon 7D on a monopod, 4 points of contact, the arm under this point of contact, this point of contact. That's 3, 5 actually. The monopod hitting the ground, and a little Zacuto magnifying glass on the LCD screen so I could manually dial in the focus, contact, trying to make smooth wedding videos, and they were really smooth. So listen, you can figure this out. You can put your camera on a tripod. You can use some technology. You can work on your posture. You can hold the camera with the 2 points of content and the elbows in. A lot of it is form and technique. All these whippersnappers, anybody feel my energy right now? These days are like, no, it just doesn't have to. Like I want my phone to be a drum. I want my phone to fly. I want my phone to also be able to float and follow me around. It needs to have perfect image stabilization. I also want perfect blurry background. I also want to be able to zoom in a football field length and get perfect clarity on somebody's eye with eye autofocus. I like all the new features, but we're going to be okay. we're going to be all right. And we're going to be able to solve problems that are necessary to solve. And one of the ways you can do that when it comes to stabilization is using something like a gimbal. This is why gimbals are powerful. And even if you have image stabilization in IBIS, you can really benefit from a gimbal to get cinematic shots. And there's smartphone gimbals. The heavier the camera gets, the stronger the gimbal motor needs to be if you start putting bigger lenses, bigger glass, bigger cameras on it. But that would be one way to solve the problem of image stabilization. All right, hit like if you're getting value. We still got the ways to save money, my top camera picks. We still got 2 more points. And let me know what camera you're shopping for next. The next thing to consider, 12, is your frame rate and slow motion. So what frame rates is the camera equipped with? You can go into the menu and select different frame rates. You could go into your iPhone 13 now, iPhone 12, and select 4K, 4K 60, 4K 30, 1080p, HD, 60 frames, 120 frames, sometimes 240 frames. You can go into your GoPro, select 5K, 480 frames. I don't know, like different frame rates. And remember, do you really need these or not? Like if you're going to sit down and train and do videos like this that are education at a desk, you don't need super slow motion. But if you're like, I do backflips, like I am the TikToker, like I'm a TikTok backflipper. I need slow motion to show the nuances of that backflip. Have you seen my dance moves? What do you need? Is it action sports? Do you want to cinematically create different shots? And so 24 frames per second, that's what FPS stands for. A lot of people will shoot their YouTube videos in that. It's also kind of known as the film look. And 30 frames is kind of just standard right in the middle. And 60 frames per second is what a lot of gaming creators want because you can see the motion better. It also sometimes could be that reality TV show type of look. And you also can start doing slow motion as you get into higher frame rates. And 120 frames per second and above are for super slow motion. On screen, you're seeing what is called the Sony R5, I believe. And there's also like the R7. And so some of these Sony point and shoots, they have a high frame rate mode where you can shoot bursts of 480 frames per second slow motion. Now, one of the things, just like thinking about resolution, you go, oh, cool, it has slow motion. Little did you know that when you actually shoot 120 frames, all of a sudden the footage turns into Minecraft characters, and it is the worst video picture of all time. So just because a camera can do 4K and do slow motion doesn't actually mean that it's going to look great. But these are some things to consider when it comes to your frame rates. And so let me ask you, are you planning on buying a camera soon? And which model, especially considering these things, are you looking at? The 13 is a clean HDMI output for live streaming. Now, you may not need this because you may not plan to live stream. But if you look at this shot right here, that is a HDMI cable plugged into a camera. And then it's plugged into a cam link, which is a little capture card that can plug into your USB port on your computer. If you're going to use a device like this, you want to have clean HDMI out of your camera. Otherwise, around the camera would be the little numbers and like the time code. And some cameras, you can't get that off screen. So if you want to live stream, this is why people say, oh, I want a clean HDMI output. So here's a question that you should ask. Does the camera have a clean HDMI output? And there are ways to work around this. One of our favorite cameras is the Sony ZV-1. And you can see here that it has an HDMI cable plugged into it, and it has a clean HDMI output. And it also has a USB-C cable plugged in. You actually don't even need a dummy battery for this camera. If you just plug in your USB cable and you plug it into a wall charger that has power delivery or has enough power output, it will actually keep the battery charged in my experience, indefinitely. And you don't even have to buy a dummy battery. So this is one of our top cameras of all time right now, but one of the best cameras going into 2022 because it's checking the box on these features. You may not want to live stream with it right now, but you'll have the peace of mind that in the future, you can keep the power continuous to it, clean HDMI output, and you also can use software-based solutions, which we'll talk about in a second. This is a Sony a6400. In this case, I have a dummy battery plugged in, so you can see the cable coming out of the dummy battery, out of the battery port. And then on the other side of the camera is the HDMI port. And again, it's plugged in to a capture card. And if you're curious about how I live stream, and there's two different studios that I live stream from with two different setups, we'll link to videos in the show notes that break that down so you can see how to set all of this up. But this would be a clean HDMI out port is what HDMI port is what you're looking for. Now, there are things now. Sony has software, Canon has software. Canon's is called the EOS webcam utility. The new Canon M50 Mark II, for example, one of the things they changed was they gave you a clean HDMI output. Therefore, if you want to live stream with it basically more professionally with the highest quality video possible, you probably want to use the HDMI. But because there's software now, a lot of Canon's backlog, even cameras that are 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 years old, can actually be used as a webcam now, just software based, even if they don't have a clean HDMI output, because the software overrides it and it gives you like a webcam picture like this. And so I know for sure Canon, I think every brand is working on it, but Canon has that now. So you could see if your camera is compatible. And then Sony also has that, which essentially gives you options. So if you want to use the Sony ZV-1, you could use Sony software, or you could build out a more professional, robust live streaming setup and use a capture card of some kind. And so for YouTube creators, I think this is something you should consider because you may want to do live stream content. They then may want to vlog with the camera. You definitely want to use it probably too for photography. So you can create thumbnails and social media images to promote your content. And so what are Think Media's top recommended cameras going into 2022? Glad you asked. And considering all of these features, this is our conclusion. Number one is the Sony ZV-1. It's around $750 for a retail price. And again, it's actually on sale at the time of recording this for $638 during the holidays. It is a point and shoot camera. So the one weakness is you can't change the lens, but you have a clean HDMI output. You can charge it with continuous power right off a USB cord. You've got 1.8 on the aperture, 4K that doesn't have any crop. The 13 features I just talked about, that's what I am emphasizing when we are picking the best cameras. Hear me. I'm not saying for weddings. I'm not saying for even filmmakers. I'm saying for YouTube content creators for the biggest needs that we have. Next would be the Sony ZV-E10. That's probably the number one camera we recommend for YouTube right now because you do have interchangeable lenses and you have all the features we mentioned, except things like IBIS, which enters into cameras being a little more expensive. It's also not a full frame camera, which doesn't matter, but it's crop sensor. So next would be the Sony a6600. You're getting that same crispy 4K quality. Now you're getting a headphone output and you're getting in-body image stabilization. And on this list, finally, is the Sony a7C. Now we're in a full frame camera with a screen that flips to selfie, with a headphone jack, a mic jack, in-body image stabilization. And if you want to go full frame, that's what I'd recommend. I said what I said. I know shots have been fired now. I know that we're offended. I know. And my question for you is, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Oh, he's a Sony fanboy. I'm a nothing boy. What? Like this is the best answer to the 13 questions we outlined. But I'm curious. Do you agree with my opinion? Do you disagree with my opinion? These are not the only cameras that are possible to create content with, obviously. And there's a lot of other cameras we love for a lot of other reasons. Of course, budget comes into play. But here's my point, friend. At $698 for the Sony ZV-E10, which is actually sold out everywhere, there's probably good reason. Like, that's even pushing into the budget realm. Like, that's really pushing down affordability wise. Now, as you can see on screen, one thing to note, budget comes into play majorly here because these second three cameras, this is only the body, meaning you're going to have to get a lens. You're going to have to purchase a lens, and eventually you might want to purchase multiple lenses, but this would be the list. But Sean, what if I have a lower budget? What if I have a different type of camera? All right, well, here are the best budget cameras for YouTube and a couple alternative selections. Sean, I don't have $700. You can get a Logitech webcam for $59, plug it into your laptop and start creating content. You got HD, so $59. That's a good starting point. You could get action cameras. In some cases, you can live stream with these as well, power them continuously, plug in HDMI into little, combo little extender kits or media kits for the GoPro or the DJI Osmo Pocket. $200, $300 for the GoPro Hero 8. For a mirrorless camera body, the Canon M50 refurbished, and I'll help you if you want to find the refurbished website. We'll put that in the show notes. The Canon M50 is $459 and it goes on sale sometimes as much as $400. At this point, you do have the software for live streaming, even though it doesn't have a clean HDMI output, doesn't matter because you can use the software. Interchangeable lenses, a great picture, kind of unusable for 4K because of the crop factor, but a really great camera that has a 30-minute record limit. So we still love the Canon M50, incredible camera. We love tons of cameras. Just trying to give you my honest heart. And by the way, we have worked with all these different companies. This video is not sponsored. No camera company is paying me to say any of this. I want you to also hear this. Like, this is just my best answer from my heart, but I am curious. I'd love to discuss. Let's talk in the comments. What is your alternative recommendation? And surprise guest, the Panasonic G7 with the camera lens, you can get for $599. And the reason I don't think Panasonic is great for YouTube is because you have not as great autofocus. It's contrast based, but that is an incredible 4K camera. Filmmakers can just get crazy results out of it. You could still do a lot of cool stuff on YouTube for it, lock focus down, or just trust the contrast based autofocus. And you also get the lens at $600. So these are some alternatives to check out. Now, a huge mistake people make though, is when thinking about budget, you only think about the camera. You also got to think about the accessories. And if you want to know our best accessories for when it comes to lighting, audio, tripod, lenses, and to consider all of that, check out the link in the description or some summaries of some of our best videos on that. But Ansel Adams, a famous photographer, said that the single most important component of a camera is the 12 inches behind it. So as I've thrown out these opinions on cameras, as you might be thinking, oh, I don't know, budget is tight right now. Listen, friend, the most important component of the camera is the person using the camera. It's your creativity. It's really not about your resources. It's about your resourcefulness. Use what you have and level up as you go. And here's a couple ways, as I promised you, to save money even more. So one is you don't have to buy the newest models. There's so many great cameras out there. The ZV-1 is a little bit older now, but you can go back. Canon 80D, it's like 5 years old now. It's great. Canon T6i, like there's a lot of great older models you can buy refurbished, and you don't have to overspend on features you don't need. If you're really honest about the features you do need, you don't have to overspend. And instead of buying a camera, use your phone and accessorize your phone. Get a microphone, get some lighting for your phone. You can check out Amazon Warehouse and Renewed deals, where to save even more on all kinds of different cameras. And I had mentioned this is the Canon refurbished website, which for $519 at the time of recording this video, you can get the camera and the lens. With a 1-year warranty, it's basically good as new. So what do you think is the best camera for YouTube? And do you disagree or agree with my top picks? And if you actually want to see a breakdown of our top cameras compared and look at some example footage, click or tap the screen to watch our best camera picks here and what the footage actually looks like. And I will see